The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi and welcome to this ChemCareers webinar. This afternoon we're going to be talking about mentoring for CChem, so really exploring how and why you might want to support someone as a mentor through their CChem. My name is Laura Woodward. I work in the careers management team, and I'm joined today by my colleague Janelle Harvey. I'll get her to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Janelle or Nellie, and I work in our accreditation team at the Royal Society of Chemistry and look after all things to do with charterships, whether that's individuals going for Chartered Chemist status or the programs that we run within companies and higher education institutions.
So just to remind you all, if you want to ask any questions, pop them into the question part of the online, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. Nellie and I are going to, well, Nellie mainly, but I'm going to chip in as well, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can at the end. So over to you, Nellie.
Thank you, Laura. I want to just begin by having a brief overview of why we're doing the webinar today. This webinar is for everyone who is considering being somebody's mentor for Chartered Chemist status. It's also for those people who have heard a little bit about the mentoring, maybe they were mentored themselves for Chartered Chemist, and they would like to know a little bit more about the process and how they can get involved. What this webinar isn't is a full-on detailed overview of what a good application should look like. This is because that's primarily your mentee's responsibility, that we have done webinars on that in the past that you can find on our channel, and there's lots of information on our website, guidance documents with all sorts of useful examples in around completing the portfolio and providing the right evidence. This is really just an introductory discussion around what's required for mentoring for chartership. So we'll cover these sections here that I've numbered A to G. We'll have a brief introduction to Chartered Chemist. Now this will be a recap for some of you, or it will be quite new to some of you, and that's fine. And we'll cover what professional recognition is. Then we'll go on to who is eligible for CChem, and this is important for you to know as a mentor, because you might be asked, oh, do you think I'm eligible? So this is going to give you that information to explain that, or help you explain that for you. And then lastly, in section A, we'll go on to how your mentee actually gets Chartered Chemist. And as I said before, there's lots of information and detail found on our web pages. Moving on, we'll look at why someone should be a mentor for Chartered Chemist and highlight the benefits to you, because believe it or not, there are some. It's not all about the mentee's development, you get some development too. And then moving on to section C, we will go through the differences between the different mentoring programs that our careers team run and the mentoring for CChem. They are connected in a way, but they aren't inherently joined up, if that makes sense. And we will look then at how one can help with the other and cover some common questions. Then moving on, section D, we'll review what a CChem mentor actually does. So in other words, your role and responsibilities. Moving on, how you get started. Someone might ask you, or you might let people know you're willing to be a mentor. We'll cover briefly some key points about maintaining the relationship. I often get asked by CChem mentors, I have this problem, how do I get round it? So I thought give you a bit of an overview of everything from start, middle to finish, really, on what we're looking for in a CChem mentor and how to do it. Having said all of that, we have a Q&A session at the end, so if you've got any questions that I've not actually covered, then's your time to ask them. And then similarly, we have lots of information on our website already. So moving on to this first section. So we'll cover here an introduction to Chartered Chemist. So starting on the left-hand side, I just wanted to show you how everything fits together from our point of view at the Royal Society of Chemistry. So on the left-hand side, we have someone who is new to chemistry. They would be an affiliate member, they would go for registered science technician, and that award is linked to the level that they're working at, which means that they are their work is quite well defined, their problems that they have to solve don't require too much additional action from the candidate, that they know very well the work they have to do, they do it to a high standard, but they don't have to necessarily go beyond that too much. Moving on to registered scientists, so the one in the middle there, this is for people who would be an associate member. So they would get AMRC after their name as well as RSci after their name. And this is usually where those people from a more vocational background and people from a degree background might converge in the early parts of their career. And this is a good interim award for people thinking about moving to Chartered Chemist status. It enables them to practice certain skills such as self-reflective writing. However, evidence isn't needed for the registers, so RSci Tech or RSci, portfolio of evidence isn't required, just the self-written statements. A little bit more on these two awards. They don't require a mentor. Chartered chemists and chartered scientists require mentors and supporters. For the registers, they just require someone to generally support their application, read it through, say, yeah, I think they're a great candidate. So that could be or provide you with a stepping stone for your own journey. If maybe you wanted to go on to mentoring a chartered candidate, you might start by supporting a register's candidate in the first place. And then moving on the right-hand side there, we have charterships, which are linked to someone who is a member or a fellow. And these people are typically quite in command of their workspace, their schedule, the work that they do, any problems that they have to deal with. They might be leading on how you approach solving the problem and forming those plans around that. So as we go from left to right, from affiliate through to member and fellow, the candidate is gaining more and more autonomy and responsibility in the workplace. Before we move on, I might just add that a mentor for someone who is at the MRSC membership grade might need to give a bit more support to the candidate than the chartership candidate who has fellow status. Similarly, fellows also need a bit of help every now and then, drawing on the highlights of their career. So it does vary. It doesn't mean that a fellow doesn't need a mentor. Actually, they could still need a mentor, but generally in our experience, we see that people who are MRSC require a little bit more mentoring and coaching element than the FRSC candidates. So I just wanted to cover now sort of professionalism within the chemical sciences, and these three elements that go into making someone a chartered chemist. So if we start on the left-hand side there, all professionals, and specifically chartered chemist professionals here, need to have gained a certain level of knowledge. And this is qualifications or on-the-job learning up to and even beyond the master's level. This doesn't mean to say that the chartered chemist has to have a master's qualification or a PhD. They don't necessarily need to. But what we do need to see is that they've achieved that level, and they can demonstrate this through what we term as the equivalence report. So in order to be a professional, you all need to at least know something to begin with. Moving on to the one in the middle, you need to know certain sorts of information to do your job at this high level, but then the Chartered Chemist candidate then needs to show how they use that knowledge. So it's not enough to just have the qualifications, you then need to use them. And most people can demonstrate this through the Chartered Chemist application. So this is the platform where someone can say, I have this knowledge and this is how I use it. And then moving on, the final element of a professional chartered chemist is this concept of keeping learning or continuing professional development. And in order to maintain the Chartered Chemist Award, the candidate and indeed yourselves need to be committed to maintaining your CPD and keeping your knowledge and skills refreshed and up to date, and indeed learning new ones. I've looked at a range of charterships, including Chartered Engineer, and across the board, really, these three elements of gaining knowledge, using knowledge, and then keeping learning are central to what makes someone a professional in their chosen discipline.
Could someone being a mentor for someone doing CChem, could that be part of their own CPD, so they could use that as their own professional development?
Yes, yes, Laura, that's absolutely right. If someone is being a mentor, so you guys and girls listening, you can either be a chartered chemist and maintain it by being someone's mentor, or you could indeed be working towards your own chartered chemist, if that's how it's worked out. And then you could use that as evidence towards your own chartership application. So all in all, being someone's mentor is an excellent way of fulfilling that commitment to CPD and developing and enhancing new and existing skills in a range of areas, I should say. Highly recommended. Moving on, just a recap of who is eligible to be a chartered chemist, because you might be asked. The first bullet point is that we require all chartered chemist candidates to be a full member, so MRSC, or fellow FRSC. If someone is an associate member and they can't yet upgrade to full member, then you should advise them to consider applying for either registered science technician or registered scientist. Moving on, the chartered chemist candidate requires a master's level, and again, doesn't necessarily mean they have a master's or PhD, but a master's level of specialised chemistry knowledge, which is critical to fulfilling their own job role. So we're looking for someone who is, again, with that higher level of autonomy and responsibility in the workplace, and that they take ownership for work, and that they might be responsible for all sorts of things, including budgets, time, people, or projects. This doesn't mean that they have to be a manager in order to go for chartered chemist. So put that thought out of your mind. It's really about people who are in command of the work that they're doing at quite a high level. So they could be the specialist in a team, not necessarily managing people or budgets in that way. But they must be autonomous. And when someone is applying for chartered chemist, they have to go through two stages. One is eligibility, and the next one is the actual application. At the eligibility step, the mentee, so the candidate, has to let us know who their mentor is. So right from the get-go, they choose a mentor and then let us know who that is. They have to justify why they're choosing you. It's not as scary as it sounds. In a nutshell, that is that they have to convince us that you are the right person to guide them through the process, that you can meet with them often enough, and that you know their work and can comment on it. So I mentioned earlier that a CChem mentor may or may not be chartered. We often prefer the mentors to be chartered, and that could be with us or another professional body. But the most important thing is that you know the candidate and you know their work. So even if you aren't chartered, if you fulfill this requirement and can comment on their work, then you will make a good mentor and you'll be a good choice for that as well. So just to cover how your mentee will actually gain Chartered Chemist status, their application when they come to it is based on 5 families of attributes. There are 12 attributes in total. The first 3, scientific competence, autonomy and professionalism, communication and influence, are broken down into further subsets of attributes that make up the bulk of the application. And then environment, health and safety considerations and involvement, as well as involvement in broader developments within the chemical sciences, are not broken down. These are standalone, sort of weighty in their own right attributes. These 5 families of attributes are all based around a competence development framework. So it's not important for a mentee to show, let's say, specific chemistry knowledge they have, but what they need to show are how they use it against the different requirements and attributes there. So once a candidate feels that they can meet all of these, they then would put together their portfolio of primary evidence, including 1 piece of evidence per attribute, and accompanying that will be 12 self-reflective written statements that the mentee will put together, giving context and flavour to the primary evidence that they've supplied. And finally, on this application, the mentor, so you, will provide similar statements, 1 for each family, so 5 in total, of how the mentee has demonstrated the attributes. You might give a bit more detail where it's needed, if you felt it was needed, or you might give additional flavour and context to the work that they've already outlined. So, for example, a candidate might say they worked on project X and did all these things and it was wonderful, but you might provide in your statement actually why it was important this candidate worked on this project, what the wider business impact was, either upwards or downwards, or to external people. So giving that bit more of a broader context of the evidence that the candidate has provided there. You can see on the top right of the slide here we have this word cloud. I quite like this word cloud. It shows you lots of different examples of evidence that someone can use in their chartership application, and one of the main things for you to take away from this is that your candidate's evidence must have variety. Not all the same technical reports or not all the same emails, but a nice mix, things like minutes, certificates, technical emails, coaching emails, testimonials if that's what they want to use, as well as any sort of COSH forms and things like that that's related to the work that they're doing. Moving on now, why mentor for CChem? Well, firstly, the mentee needs a mentor. This is an integral part of the process, that it's simply not terribly beneficial for the mentee to charge through trying to get their chartership without that oversight that a mentor brings. So the mentor needs to review the mentee's evidence. They also help identify good examples that reflect the mentee's experience and skills. This is an important one because sometimes we struggle to see the wood for the trees, in that we don't know what to highlight ourselves from our experiences. What are they looking for? What's good to show? And sometimes a mentee might pick evidence that is just not quite as suitable as one that you might identify. So your job there is to help them show their best side. You should keep them on track. That's help, not lead them. You don't have to do it, they do. And then finally, every mentee needs their mentor to make their first recommendation that they become a chartered chemist. So in essence, you are their first peer review assessor. For you, there are lots of benefits, some which will become immediately obvious and some which will develop over time. Mentoring for you for chartered chemists here will improve, and we've seen this a lot in lots of different organisations. It helps you improve relationships with your colleagues, which could impact on your performance in your current role. Sometimes candidates might pick a mentor who is their direct line manager, and that's fine. However, often candidates like to pick a mentor who they don't directly report to. And if this is your particular circumstance, then it will help you gain a greater understanding and depth of knowledge and appreciation for other parts of your organisation where you work. Gives you insight into what's going on the shop floor, almost, in a way that you might not otherwise have, because no one would talk to you about what's going on in their roles unless they have to. Secondly, it can help you gain or develop leadership skills, as any mentoring relationship would. Will help with communication and interpersonal skills. Some critical feedback might be required if a candidate has not really picked the ideal piece of information to share with us. And so one of your challenges will be to review the evidence that they've picked, think, oh, is this suitable? Maybe there's a better one we could use. And then, of course, having to communicate that back to your mentee requires a bit of tact there. You will achieve greater clarity around your own career strengths. So it's always the old adage, when you start to help someone else with these things, it helps you see your own areas where you can work on and think, oh, I should focus on that a little bit more. So similarly, you'll learn about yourself, gain greater self-confidence, as well as pursuing other professional development learning opportunities. I want to cover now the difference between the two mentoring programs, simply because I want to clarify that there are two programs, mentoring for CChem and then what I'm calling just now the general mentoring initiative that we run at the Royal Society of Chemistry. We often get asked from members about both types of mentoring programs. Sometimes people might get a bit confused and mistake one for the other. So I thought it was probably a good opportunity now just to explain that we have two and they are different, but that one can help support the other.
And I think it's worth, I manage the member-to-member mentoring scheme, and I think it's worth mentioning, I think all the things that you highlighted in terms of the differences and similarities are there. I think we're going to talk about those now, aren't you? But yeah, you're right. We do get asked a lot about both of them and which one they can do.
Yeah. So to begin with, I want to focus on mentoring for CChem. So usually the mentor will work in the same place as the mentee. That's not always the case, but it is most often the case. And this is because as a mentor, you need to review your mentees' work-based examples and evidence. And so obviously, both of you will be find them with considerations around confidentiality and sensitivity of the information being shared. And for that reason, most often people pick a mentor who is from the same organisation that they work in. Ideally, a chartered chemist mentor should hold chartered status, and that is because they either will have gone through a similar process or they understand what it is to be chartered. We might have revalidated their chartership status at some point over the last few years. Being a CChem mentor is over a defined period. So if your candidate is experienced, then they might go through the direct route, which could be anywhere from 1 day to 12 months in duration, depending on how organised and quick they are at getting their applications together. They still need a mentor to give them that first recommendation for chartership. Or the mentoring period could last up to 2 years if the candidate has less experience and they go via the professional development programme or the PDP route. So it could vary between 1 day to 12 months or up to 2 years. For CChem, there are predefined goals. In other words, you know what's needed because we give you the list of 12 attributes. We tell you we require a portfolio and some written statements. And so you can see at a glance if the mentee is on track, if they are struggling in any areas, and you know as well how far through the relationship you are. There are predefined goals, which means there's a well-defined end point to the relationship. And similarly, well-defined role and expectations. It is the mentee that has to put their application together. You have to review it and give them the recommendation in its simplest form. It's mentee-led. It could be directive in that you as a mentor might offer suggestions on rewording something in a different way or offering suggestions on how they might evidence an attribute or seek an opportunity to evidence the attribute. And you give clear feedback to the mentee. For the general mentoring programme, I've just written down sort of counterpoints in a way to the CChem mentoring. So I think if you want to,
do you want me to talk about them?
I think that would be helpful.
So as you can see here, so it's slightly there's a few differences. So usually the mentor and mentee don't know each other beforehand, so they will be matched by someone from the RSC. In fact, they'll be matched by me, and the way we do that is through questionnaires. So both the mentor and the mentee completes a questionnaire, and then we try and match on, for example, if the mentee is looking for maybe specific support, maybe they're currently working in academia and they want to move into industry, they might ask for someone in industry, they might want to work with someone of a specific gender, and where we can, we try to match people on those. Obviously we're limited by how many mentors we have available, but if we can match on those things, we do. And we remind people, you know, that in order to access the scheme, so in order to be a mentor in the general mentoring scheme, you must be a member or a fellow, but anyone from AMRSC or above can access the scheme as a mentee. But we remind people, you know, you will all have in common the RSC as your sort of starting point. As Nellie's outlined here, the topics covered can be much broader, so it might be that they have a very specific career goal or career issues that they want to discuss with you. Ultimately, the scheme is there as a career benefit, but as a general mentor, it is very likely that you will talk much more broadly than that. So you'll be dealing potentially with other things that are going on in their life, helping them explore those things, which may well then support them with their sort of overall sort of career goals. Absolutely, the length of the relationship is flexible, so we just sort of don't define how long that relationship lasts. We find on average somewhere around 12 to 15 months is normal, but it could be a lot less, and in some cases it is longer than that. Again, it will really depend on what the mentee is needing support with from you as a mentor. Absolutely, you must be a member, but you don't necessarily need to be chartered. And yes, it's usually non-directive, so it's really about giving the mentee the sort of the time and the space to think about things. For example, they may know that they want to make a change in their life, but they don't know what that change might look like, and you kind of facilitate their thinking rather than kind of very clearly sort of telling them or giving them the answers. And again, it is led by the mentee, so the mentee should be driving it, but you as a mentor will probably do much more sort of coaching type things with them. So there are some similarities, but some quite distinct differences as well.
Yes, and I should add that as a mentor, you might be somebody's CChem mentor 1 year, and then another year you might decide that you'd like to join as a mentor the general mentoring program there. It is possible to move between the two because of the reasons around being a CChem mentor. The role and responsibilities are quite well defined. You know what needs to be done and when it needs to be done by. Therefore, it's quite a good springboard if you're new to mentoring, having a go at that first, developing some of those listening and interpersonal skills through being a CChem mentor, and then as you gain more confidence and experience, you might choose then to join the general mentoring program, and that's fine. To work
all the mentors that go through the general program attend a day's training session, so we equip you with the skills and the expectations that we have of you as a mentor. But I think you're right, Nelly. I think it's being a CChem mentor is a good sort of springboard, because you will develop a lot of the skills, and actually probably one of the most important skills as a mentor, whether it's a CChem mentor or a general mentor, is those listening skills. And so it is really good little springboard. We do have some people who do both sort of concurrently, obviously different people, but yeah, so it's something to think about, I think, when you sort of become a CChem mentor, to remember that other scheme exists as well.
So I want to go through about 4 common questions that we have. There are obviously a lot more, but this is a good place to start.
And I've just answered.
So you have. Yes, you can be both a CChem mentor and a general mentor. I think our only advice in that respect would be, obviously, you need to manage your time and what you can commit to, because both relationships, the CChem one and the general mentoring one, require some commitment from you as the mentor, and you don't want to try and do everything and then not really support either mentee very well. So just bear that in mind. You don't want to stretch yourself too thin. How can I develop my mentoring skills? Well, as we have already mentioned, that being a CChem mentor can help develop those skills to become a general mentor. But as I said earlier on as well, if you wanted, you could begin by being a supporter for a registered scientist applicant, where you would review their evidence, just check it's all sane and correct, and then provide a supporting statement. And so that could give you the first experience of developing those sort of reviewing skills needed for being a CChem mentor. The third question is, I don't have much time, can I still be a mentor? Yes, you can. Being a CChem mentor could be an option for those who can't necessarily commit to the general mentoring. And again, pick your relationships well. Someone who is very experienced going for Chartered Chemist might not need to see you as often as someone who is at the beginning of their chartership and career journey. They might need more support. So if you don't have too much time to devote to the candidate, but you feel you have something to give, then it might be that you go and seek those relationships with a candidate who is more experienced, just to help them. And then as you get a bit more time back in your schedule or your work commitments, you could then move on to helping someone through that 2-year professional development program route. And the fourth question we get asked a lot is, you are the mentee's line manager, can you still be their mentor? Yes, you can. We just like to see when the mentee suggests you as their mentor in the first instance, that you both understand that you need enough time dedicated to these professional development discussions. That yes, the work priorities obviously are there, but sometimes we do see in relationships, actually it becomes all about the work objectives, and the candidate going for their chartership gets squeezed out or not discussed at all. Whereas if you weren't the person's line manager, you wouldn't have these other pressures about them meeting their objectives. You could just focus on the professional development aspects.
Do you normally, someone who's mentoring someone through CChem, they'd normally just do one at a time rather than 2 or 3?
Yes. Well, again, it depends. So depending on the types of people you're mentoring, you might want to just stick to one mentee. So if someone needs quite a lot of help, I know if I were to go for it, I would need a fair bit of coaching to begin with, and support and understanding what's needed and what I need to go and do. So if someone was mentoring me, they might like to have just the one person. As that mentoring relationship nears its conclusion, they might then start to look and take on more mentees. So it is flexible. I would say, if you don't want to mentor someone, then you don't have to. Just because they ask doesn't mean you have to say yes. And as long as you communicate with them and explain maybe the reasons why you can't take them on right now as a mentee clearly and objectively, then I don't really foresee any big issues with that.
Are there ever instances where you've got someone who's really wants to be a CChem mentor, but actually there's no one else in their organisation that is a chemist, and so they haven't got anyone to mentor through CChem? Are there ever instances where you might match them with someone? I don't know how easy that is.
So we don't have a formal programme or a formal list, let's say, of potential chartership mentors. And it's something we have thought about, but there are those issues, as I mentioned, around confidentiality and IP, that, whilst someone might like to mentor someone in another organisation, the mentee's organisation maybe won't permit that. As the mentor, you need to have seen the primary evidence in its crude format. The mentee might abridge it or crop it or just include an extract in their evidence, but you need to attest that you've seen the original, basically. So sometimes that is quite hard to do. Having said that, though, we do sometimes see mentors from academic institutions mentoring someone, let's say, who was a postdoctoral researcher or a PhD student, working towards chartership, and then when they go and enter a different workplace, they might maintain that relationship. And that's fine to do if the candidate is near the end. If they aren't near the end, it's better for the candidate to find a new mentor, probably based where they're working.
No, that makes sense. Thank you.
So I just want to review now the role and responsibilities of the mentor. You ideally should meet at least quarterly. It could be more. When you meet and in between meetings, you really should review the mentee's evidence. So this is the primary evidence, the technical report, the emails, the testimonials, the COSH forms, as well as their written statements. And you're checking that these examples are good examples that reflect the candidate's skills and experience, that you're helping them show their best side. You also help to support the candidate to seek out and take advantage of opportunities to fulfil the attributes. For example, a candidate would like to deliver a presentation, but maybe because of the work they do, that might be a bit challenging, or they need something that was done quite recently. So as a mentor, you might help facilitate that candidate. You might help them identify where they could give a talk, and then helping them ensure that it happens. You might liaise with the mentee's manager if the mentee gives you permission to help with that point, the previous point about candidate accessing new opportunities. You've got to help keep the mentee on track. It is mentee-led, but sometimes we all just need a little bit of support from someone saying, oh, when shall we next meet? And it really ought to come from the mentee, but if it doesn't, you are allowed to ask them. But if you feel that you're scheduling all the meetings, that you're telling them what to do and how to put their chartership application together, then I would say the relationship's a bit too much skewed your way, and actually control needs to revert back to the mentee. You need to review the entire submission, check that it's accurate and that it's suitable, that the right evidence is given for the right attribute. You provide a comment on how well the mentee meets each family of attributes, as I said earlier in the webinar, and you make their first recommendation for Chartered Chemist. So how to get started? Here are some places that you can consider becoming a CChem mentor. Number one would be my top one, is that if no one has approached you, maybe you should let people know that you're happy to be a mentor for chartership. Often we find you could have a candidate at an organisation and they really want to be chartered, but they don't know who has CChem status. So put it on the end of your email signatures, tell people about it, that you're chartered, and share with them that you'd be happy to mentor them, and you may very well be asked. Second one is that the mentee might ask you rather than you approaching them. I would just ask you to check that you have the time, that you are familiar with chartership, and hopefully after this webinar you are, and that you have a rapport with the mentee, that you get on well. It is a relationship that does depend a little bit on having a connection with someone. So if for any reason that just isn't there, maybe help them find a different mentor. If you aren't chartered, you can still be a CChem mentor, but you will have to help your mentee justify their choice when they first apply, and that is again that you have enough time, that you know their work, that you can provide that guidance and support for the candidate. You might want to start by supporting colleagues through the registers, and then if you've done any of 1 to 4, at that point your mentee registers you as their mentor with us. You don't have to do anything formal with us. You just have to let the mentee know that you're happy to mentor them. They would put it on their form, and then we keep a record of that. We provide some guidance on our website and a follow-up email when you sign up as a mentor that just has some general information on tips and where you can help guide your mentee. And finally, do speak to our careers management team, Laura, here, if you want to join the general mentoring programme. I feel I should add that on just in case any of you were wondering how you get started on that. So I want to cover some points here about maintaining the relationship. It's most chartership relationships, mentor-mentee relationships, happen without any issues whatsoever, and that's because it's quite well defined. There's not too much to disagree on or struggle with. Having said that, here are some common pitfalls that some people have come against. So the first one would be that you should check the progress of your mentee against the attributes and their goals regularly. Don't just assume that they're doing all right. You should take some responsibility in just checking that they're progressing as you've both agreed that they would. Secondly, it might be wise to discuss any potential issues looming on the horizon. This could be work-related, it could be personal. For example, someone requires a break because they're going on parental leave, or they've got caring responsibilities, or similarly they've been called away at work on another project, or they've been seconded somewhere, or they've had to move to another location. You should discuss these things with the candidate a bit in advance where possible, so that together you can help the mentee form a bit of an action plan on how they'll mitigate, if they still want to go forward with chartership, how they could mitigate any effects these disruptions could have. If someone is taking a break from work or because of work from the chartership programme, they must let us know, and that's simply because if people spend longer than the 12 months for direct or the 2 years for the PDP and they don't tell us, we just assume that they're not interested anymore and we take them off the system, we deregister them. And so if someone wanted to reactivate that, they would have to go through the whole process again. However, if they're just taking a break or for whatever reason, they can just let us know, or you can let us know on their behalf, and we can just simply put a pause on their application, and for however long that they require. There's no problem there. You just need to let us know. You should let the mentee lead the relationship. If the mentor-mentee relationship isn't working for whatever reason, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a negative one, it could be that you have been asked to work on something that's a bit more involved or taken you away from your normal responsibilities. So actually you can't fulfill your obligations as the mentor anymore. That is okay. But I would say where possible, and I understand it's not always possible, that you help the mentee find a new mentor. Don't just cut the strings and let them flounder. Perhaps you could speak to their line manager, you could talk it through with the mentee themselves, help them identify potential other mentors that might be good to approach. You could even discuss the candidate's progress with their new mentor as a sort of handover if the mentee is happy with that. I would always advocate trying to help the mentee if you need to change being their mentor. And then finally, at all times, your relationship with the candidate must be professional, courteous, and confidential. I've said that the relationship is quite well defined, essentially based on meeting the attributes, but along the way, discussions might touch upon other elements of work life or personal life of the mentee, and so you might be privy to some more confidential discussions that you have with the candidate. And so just bear that in mind. Everything that you say in the mentoring relationship should be kept confidential. Sometimes there are more important things in life than them getting their Chartered Chemist status. So just bear that in mind. Don't make them cry. I say that because I have known someone in the past who said their mentor made them cry. It's important, but not in that way. This is meant to be a positive process for both you and the mentee. But really, for the mentee, it's an opportunity to assess their skills, look at where their needs are, and then try and meet them. It should be a positive experience, not something that is painful in any way. So that's it. We can open for additional questions now. I will say that if you've got any other questions outside of this, you can email us at cchem@rsc.org with any questions you've got, and we'll be able to get back to you there. But certainly, if there are any right now, we can address them.
So if anyone wants to ask any questions, we'll just give you a few minutes to type those in. Presumably, Nellie, there's support. So if a mentor is struggling with something in particular, they can contact you and say, this situation's happened. I'm not sure how. They're not sort of left on a limb to just work it out for themselves. There's plenty of support.
Yes, there is. Both the mentee and the mentor are at liberty to get in touch with us at any time with any questions that they have regarding evidence or any problems, or particularly if people change job roles or their place of work. We tend to see questions around, can I still continue, or is this evidence valid anymore, or what do I need to do here? And every step of the way, we are on hand to support both the mentor and the mentee there in evidencing and getting things right. You can sort of regard us as the second remote mentor in a way. So we support you and the candidate. And similarly, there might be support available in your own organisation if there's a group of you mentoring people towards CChem, which I know happens. Then some organisations might create a sort of mentor discussion group where you can, in a confidential way, share broadly any issues or queries that you have there. So look out for that too.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we've got any. Certainly haven't got any questions coming through. So thank you, Nellie, for taking us through all that. Like you said, the email's there if you want to get in touch and have any questions. And I hope that you found today's webinar useful.